Celtics Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtic Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. I'm your host, Justin Poulin, and joining me now, as always, my co-host, John Duke. It was a pretty interesting week. Brad Stevens wants to tell us to hold out no more hope for Gordon Hayward returning to the floor this season or for the playoffs. And then the Rockets game, a very entertaining Saturday night matchup that went the distance. Unfortunately, the Celtics fell a little short, John, but between those two topics and Al Horford's recent slump, I think we got our hands full for this show.
We got a lot to talk about, man. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the positive vibes, I'm still riding positive on this, man, because you know what? With the Celtics going the way that they're going, I feel like, look, we've got a lot of things to be feeling good about right now. I think we're at the minor quibble stage, given where we were just a few weeks back, where things were really not looking so positive. So look, I might be the good ship lollipop here in comparison to you. I'm not sure, but look, I think there's very little time left here before the end of this season. 18 games left for these Boston Celtics as we record here. Look, there's a lot of time left to go, but I feel like this is a Celtics club that's still got its best basketball ahead of it.
Yeah, very likely they do. I thought that the Rockets game really was a testament to what they have in the tank when they really want to apply themselves. You look at Marcus Morris, who probably had his best game in his Celtics uniform on Saturday night, really just hitting shots, taking the offense on his shoulders. Look at somebody like Terry Rozier, who continues to play big in certain matchups. He played well in the last game against the Houston Rockets. He came up huge again, hitting big shot after big shot. And I think that's where Brad Stevens down the stretch really struggled, is you had a player like Greg Monroe, which when he wasn't on the floor, second chance opportunities were coming to the Rockets with ease. I think that was getting under my skin. And I wasn't sure if Greg Monroe was going to end up being a player that was going to contribute a ton. But remember last season and the season before, and actually quite a few times during the KG era, we would pull our hair out over second chance opportunities, and literally Greg gets out on the floor and completely stopped the bleeding. And when he went back to the bench, we started bleeding again in that area. So I know the defense is a little sometimes missing, but if you're going to give a team that can shoot the way that the Rockets do, or for that matter, Golden State or many others, when you're going to give them the ball back 2-3 times on a possession, it really doesn't matter if you play great defense, because you got to do it 4 times before you get a chance to score.
And, to that point, Greg Monroe, he tied for the, in 19 minutes, and Aaron Baines with 12 minutes, they had the same defensive rating, which was the best on the team of 120. They were the best defensive players in this game for the Celtics. And that's saying something, given what we know of Greg Monroe and where he's been. I feel like Daniel Tice might have been able to provide quite a bit out there. But, with the Houston Rockets, who's going to kill you in the post? I suppose Nene is a guy who can be there and be a real problem for you. And I think,
could he look more out of control, though? Doesn't he just look like he's flying elbows, and it's just a mess?
Yeah. He had a really tough day there, I thought. I mean, he had 8 points, 5 boards, but it was not the Nene that I thought we were going to see, which was going to probably have, 15 points and, 8 boards or something, really making Monroe work. But Monroe was everywhere. He was making passes. That great pass from the top of the key, kind of, straight down the line. I mean, that was awesome stuff. And I think people were way too early to criticize Greg Monroe. He did everything he needed to do in that game to put them in a good position to win. Unfortunately, the team's best players weren't in that same spot, but look, Chris Paul only had 15 and 7, he didn't shine like we thought they would. Only 26 and 10 and 7 from James Harden, which is, I say only because, it's below average for him. Those aren't, standout numbers. It's the 29 points from Eric Gordon that really kind of hurts you. So, look, there was a little bit of up is down, left is right, but I thought, overall, I thought there's more to take from that game as a positive than as a negative. You feel like guys like Al Horford and Kyrie Irving aren't going to do that, not, every night or every other night or most nights.
But I thought that was a good thing.
The rule.
Yeah, I thought it was a good thing. It was really a testament to the ball movement that was going on out there as well. They were able to share. Kyrie still drew attention, which is important that he is drawing that attention. But for as much as Gordon was going off, so was Marcus Morris. We were getting offense from other places. Probably the best high-low game we've seen all year as well. And again, Greg Monroe brings something to this team that they don't have. He's a highly efficient defensive rebounder. And again, I'm not gonna hammer that point home, but that's a big point to make. But then secondarily, his ability to generate offense in the post. I mean, even Baines has really been cold, and it wasn't something where he had his back to the basket and was laying it in all season long, but he had that mid-range game that very much has tailed off. Daniel Tice, he's moved out to the three-point line and been very effective. But when you really talk about being able to just feed the post, that's going to be so beneficial to players like Kyrie Irving over the duration and into the playoffs because, at the most part, we're just shooting from the outside. I want to talk about one other thing, though. I think it's time to get excited about Monroe, and I don't think this train's going to stop. I think he's going to continue to provide more. The problem was guys like Morris and Rozier had played so well, and so had Marcus Smart up until I want to call it a knee injury, although I'm not even sure anything happened. I feel like it might have just been muscle spasms or something, because they said there was knee-to-knee contact, but you watch that replay and really nothing's there. But it's hard for Brad to pull players off the floor. And even though Horford's been struggling, we'll get to this in a minute, even though Horford's been struggling, it's hard for him to pull off his best big man, potential defensive player of the year. So if you're going to leave Monroe out there, you're going to have to probably pull a player like Smart. And they'd already shied away from Brown and Tatum in those minutes. So I get the constraint that Brad was under. I'm still going to give him some criticism because I just think if you're going to leave somebody like Morris out there, you probably should leave somebody like Monroe out there. Before we get to that, I want to talk about the officials. And I just want to say, you mentioned Chris Paul, but part of the reason Chris Paul was kept in check was because he wasn't on the floor due to foul trouble, as was Jaylen Brown. And in that respect, and I think this one went both ways, but from that vantage point, I feel like they robbed the fans of being able to see the best product out on the floor, because obviously Chris Paul is going to hurt us if he had to play more extended minutes, or if he could play more extended minutes. But then you look at a player like Jaylen Brown. He was very exciting in this game to watch, had some very early success, him and Tatum basically scoring something like 10 of the first 12 points or something ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, Brown can't stay on the floor because of foul trouble, and a couple of them were pretty mysterious calls.
Ed Malloy is the reason for a lot of the ills of that game. He is unquestionably one of the worst officials in the NBA, and yet he keeps getting these plum assignments. I am no fan of Ed Malloy. He is, there's a lot of guys who we've complained about for years and years, Bennett Salvatore, Joey Crawford, the list goes on and on. Ed Malloy is at the top or near the top of the list of the worst officials in the NBA. And he was the crew chief of last night's game, and he allowed what happened last night occur. And I don't think anybody was happy with the officiating. I mean, look, the game probably rested on a loose ball that Al Horford comes up with in the paint, and Brad Stevens yelling timeout, 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 and with the official literally 3 feet away from him, no call. And I know that's a tough call. They're focused on the action. Everyone's yelling around him. But look, if they get that ball and the Celtics retain possession, I like their chances of pulling it out. And it's things like it could be one play, but there were a lot of plays in that game, just as you said. The foul trouble on both sides. It really takes so much out of the game. And, look, I know it's a hard job to officiate NBA basketball, but man, we've done all we can to make these Saturday night games be this pinnacle of the sport, and everyone wants to tune in Saturday night to see the game, and we're going to move the schedule around, and we're going to give everyone rest, and we're going to do all these things. And then what do? You get officials out there that can't call a game. It's really a shame, and it's unfortunate for not only the players, but for those of us watching at home who want to see a good game against two teams that were really putting on an entertaining show for everybody.
All right, just a reminder, you can follow Celtic Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live, as well as your host. You can follow me at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke. The entire CLNS Media Network at CLNS Media. The Facebook page, Facebook.com/CLNS fans. And don't forget to download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace. And finally, the YouTube channel, YouTube.com/CLNS Media for high definition, full length locker room interviews and the Garden Report with Nick Gelso and Josue Pavon, everybody, Trags, got a whole group, Jimmy, what do we call him? Jimmy Big Time?
Jimmy Good Times, that's right.
Jimmy Good Times Toscano. God, I love that. So, I'm with you on the officiating. I think the thing that was frustrating was the inconsistency of it. I felt like a lot of contact was allowed in that game. So if you're going to allow a lot of contact, guys like Chris Paul and Jaylen Brown shouldn't be sitting on the bench. They should be on prime time, just as you said.
Yeah, and look, this is what it's all about, man. I mean, this is a potential finals preview right here. I mean, you don't think the league is giddy at the idea of, maybe it's not LeBron and Steph, but it's entertaining basketball with potentially the MVP of the league and an upstart, a new up-and-coming team playing in the Boston market. That's ratings gold right there. And I think that
knowing
really
that somebody like Hayward may be coming back for a rematch in that matchup the next season, 4 legitimate style contenders, who knows what's going to happen with Cleveland, but I'd say, the Rockets and Golden State are intact for the next couple of years. And so, well, pretty close to intact anyway for the next couple of years. But who knows what happens with Cleveland? But absolutely, dude. I think having multiple contenders is, I won't call it parity, but it is the kind of parity that the league needs to see. And with Chris Paul going to Houston, and you look at that record, I think Houston's going to be able to give Golden State a run for their money. And you look at Boston, obviously it would be great to have Gordon Hayward, but I still think that they may be able to give Cleveland a run for their money this year, even with LeBron being his best. And don't forget the Toronto Raptors, who are leading the league right now. So I don't know that I put the Raptors into contention. I know they're sitting there, but we've just seen them until they really get over that hump in the postseason. I can't quite put them up there. I can't even really put the Celtics there yet, but I know that a finals 7-game series between the Celtics and the Rockets based on the 2 games that they played this season would be thoroughly entertaining and make the NBA a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what the NBA should be hoping for. A little bit of parity, a little bit of excitement. Yes, everyone wants to see LeBron, but the ratings are not going to be great. There is a fatigue of Golden State, Cleveland, and everyone wants to see great teams, but they want to see something that's new and exciting. And does anyone think this is Cleveland's best shot at giving Golden State a run? I don't. I mean, right now Cleveland's lost their last 2. They're 6-4 of their last 10. They're not the same Cleveland team that beat the brains out of the Boston Celtics on Paul Pierce night. Cleveland has now settled into what they are, which is some good players who can do some things, but the parts aren't necessarily going to fit well. And I think everyone who went on a limb to say, oh, well, Cleveland's going back to the Eastern Conference final, or I should say to the finals, they're getting through the East. I don't know why people were so sure about that for 2 games. There is a lot of time left to go here. And right now Cleveland has not made that rocketing move through the standings. They're going to be the 3 seed, maybe the 4 seed if Washington keeps going. I mean, they had played better of late, but now they've lost 2 in a row. I think this is a Boston-Toronto thing for 1 and 2. The Celtics are only a game and a half back, although admittedly Toronto has 3 more games to play than Boston does the rest of the way. But Boston's got 2 more games against the Raptors. And assuming you don't have Marcus Smart out for another month and you're able to play relatively healthy, again, the Celtics stand a good chance to give Cleveland that, or I should say Toronto, that push that we've been expecting them to give them. And I think play a lot more like the Boston-Toronto game that we saw earlier in the year than the one we saw back in Toronto a few weeks back.
Okay, so in the second half of the show, we obviously have to talk about Hayward. I also want to talk about Isaiah and the Lakers because they've been on a hot streak. But we'll hit that in the second half of the show. I want to close out the first half of the show and just ask you, you saw me on Twitter. You know I have some criticism for Brad. Now, admittedly, I just said that I understand it's some difficult decisions, but I'm not necessarily saying that Al Horford has to sit on the bench, and I know that would be a very difficult move for Brad to make. But don't you think Greg Monroe should have been out there?
Against the Cleveland Cavaliers, I should say against the Houston Rockets? No, you got to pick and choose. You got one big to play. And, who are you going to put him on? You got to put him on PJ Tucker? You're going to put him on, that's, Capella's might be out there. I mean, they go small, and who's Greg Monroe going to guard out there? I guess you could guard Capella, but then you want Horford, 25 feet from the basket. It kind of limits what you can do. And
I want Horford 25 feet from the basket. That's exactly my point. If you can't put Horford on the bench, then, you've got to have Horford do what Horford does well. Is he going to get beat? Yeah, he might get beat, but then what you really want is you want to keep him shooting from the outside. You want to be able to contest shots, and you want to gather the rebounds. Again, this is my thing with this. I understand that, the whole small lineup and matching up, but then you're matching what the other team does instead of dictating to that team what you do well. And one of the things that was going really well for this club was Greg Monroe. And Marcus Morris got to hang around in that game for quite a long time too. Now I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. He did, but he deserved it just as much as Monroe did. So with Tatum sort of not really in position and Jalen having difficulty, staying on the floor. I mean, knowing how that went, why not Kyrie, Smart, Morris, Horford, and then Monroe? Do you really think they would have struggled that much? Because they had a lead. All they had to do was make sure that they had the ball.
Yeah, but I think you against a team like Houston. I mean, I think it's oversimplified. I think to suggest that you can simply put Horford out there because it's your best lineup. I think it sounds good, but I think in practicality, I don't think you want him chasing a guy like PJ Tucker around that park. I just don't. Horford is a good player, but you're when you do that, it takes away what you can do offensively. It takes away your speed, your size, your switchability, and that's what the Celtics have. They have that ability. I mean, effectively, you're saying, I think what you're saying is Mook or Monroe, and I think with the way Mook was playing, there's no question you got to play Mook Morris out there. I mean, he was probably their best offensive player in terms of his shooting touchdown in that fourth quarter.
To leave Horford on the bench in that? Would that? I mean, if Monroe's having a better game, and again, I understand. This is what I'll say. I understand that Horford's not at fault for corralling the loose ball rebound, so to speak, and then not getting the timeout. I mean, that's back on the officials. Like, they have to understand the circumstances in the game, and they have to be paying attention and expecting that and anticipating it. But let's throw that one out. I'm not going to hold that one. That's not the one that made me frustrated. It was the complete lack of ability in the offense of Horford. I mean, he was atrocious out there. He took a couple of shots and none of them looked good. And that's when the game was on the line. And so again, if he's not contributing offensively and he's struggling to that degree, and it was happening earlier in the game and it's happening over the last several games since the All-Star break, why not just stick with Monroe then in that case? Do you think it would have been the end of the world if they had benched Horford? Do you think that that would have been something that Brad Stevens couldn't have explained to the team? Do you think he can't bench his starters? Because this is my whole thing with Brad. He's a team guy, right? And so maybe this is his way of giving Al that vote of confidence and not getting in his head and all of that. But part of me is like, hey, you know what? Everybody has a part to play. Nobody's bigger than the team. Nobody preaches that more than Brad Stevens. Shouldn't he just say, look, Monroe is the hot hand we're going to ride here. He rode that bench unit deep into the fourth quarter. He had no problems keeping Brown and Tatum on the bench.
Well, Brown and Tatum is different than Al Horford. I mean, I think.
Not in this game. That's my point.
Sure
Not in this game.
Yeah, it does in the team construct. Al Horford is the dad, man. Dad doesn't sit so the kids can play. Dad runs the show, man. Dad's at the wheel. Mom's there navigating, but Dad's at the wheel. Like, you can't have Al Horford outside of that. Al Horford is a key piece here. I don't see any way if they take him off the floor unless they absolutely needed to go as small as possible. If they had to get 5 guards out there.
So it would be okay to do it to go as small as possible, but it's not okay to do it to get big when that's exactly what they needed most of this game.
I don't think at the end of the game against the Houston Rockets, that's what would have worked. I think Monroe worked when he played because he was effective against those lineups. But I don't think that the Celtics in a closing lineup that works as well. We'll see. Maybe we'll see this week.
Know, dude.
He'll go a different route, but I don't think
he was a black hole. If he was a black hole in this game, I'd agree with you. If he didn't pass and he hadn't shown that passing ability, but the truth is he was part of the reason the ball moved around. Think about how much spacing there is when you can feed the post and then he's a willing passer back out of the post and even coming into the high post. If he had one of the top defensive ratings in that game and you could look at all the reasons why and literally see it with your eyes, not have to go to the statistics to discover why or know that was the case, why not in that scenario let him stay out there until it looks like the Rockets have made the adjustment and gone small and it's not working for you anymore. That's my only thing. I get it. I know it's conventional wisdom, the reason Brad did what he did. I just feel like if that's what might have won the game, I'm not sure why we didn't do it. Because the minute he came off the floor, John, and you know this, there were so many new second and third chance opportunities. What about that Rozier pulls down the rebound? Now, yes, granted, Rozier should have just covered up the ball and waited for them to get back on D and all of that. But my point is this, several times they were given 2, 3 extra opportunities to score. And that's just as bad as, not going small and trying to defend them.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, yeah, you're right. I mean, having the ability to have, Al Horford out there and having him not having him out there and having Monroe out there securing extra rebound attempts would have been better. But who's going to space the floor, right? Who's going to? Are you going to be able to get those driving lanes? I think
Monroe did space the floor. That was exactly my point.
To where? To the free throw line? Is that enough room when Kyrie Irving needs a lane to get to the basket or Rozier needs a lane to the basket? Is that enough room? Or Al Horford's switchability, 3-point shooting.
I think people get really hung up. Here's the thing. I think people get hung up on the definition of spacing the floor, meaning only shooting. And I think what we saw from Monroe with his passing is spacing the floor. Think about how this offense gets at the end of games. They stop swinging the ball side to side. They go into ISO, and it's Kyrie Irving shooting a 3, or to your point, trying to get into the lane. And he wasn't even having a great night. The only reason you got to keep him out there is offensively he draws the defense and is a threat no matter what because they think he's going to make a shot. I don't think Al Horford draws the defense the same way that Kyrie Irving does. But if Monroe is out there and he is helping move that ball and they're playing unselfishly and they know they got Mook, and I agree, Mook doesn't come off the floor, and Mook has been hitting big shot after big shot after big shot, and they meaning the Rockets realize that the Celtics have multiple threats out there to go inside, to come outside and have the big man pass, to swing it left to the right, and maybe even catch Irving. I mean, they can still put Irving, stack him on one side in ISO, and then they could feed the middle, kick it back around, and come back to Irving after the defense is adjusted and maybe actually open up a hole for him to drive. And that's, I mean, it was unfortunate he had that one lay-in that didn't drop and it just rested on the front of the rim. Because I think if that had fallen, I know it's just, what ifs, but if that had fallen, I think this team would have walked away with a win. But I still feel like people get it into their head that spacing the floor is simply just being able to shoot from outside.
I think it creates the space that allows other things to happen. I think passing is about movement, and you need both in offense. You need spacing and you need movement. I mean, you can't, having one is good, having both is great. And I think there isn't one that's over the other, but there's no passing lanes if there's no room if there's no spacing. There's no if the ball doesn't move, that's great, but you basically are creating an ISO situation. So I understand what you're saying in that his role in the offense effectively is so supercharged in that game that, does that not create a different construct by which Brad Stevens has to build his team? And I just say almost 2 years of having Al Horford at the helm of this team, I think says, yeah, in one game you're right. He's good, but I don't think that supersedes what Al Horford has done here and what he seems to be able to continue to do. And I think, just like Kyrie Irving could be 1 for 15, and I would trust him to take that shot at the end of the game, I trust Al Horford to make the right play at the right time, especially in the closing part of a game, as opposed to Greg Monroe, who's been here 2 weeks and, he knows where the bathroom is now, but I'm not sure, he knows the best routes to get to the practice facility yet.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is going to be one to watch because I think Monroe's only heating up. I think everybody is going to be pleasantly surprised and he's going to be pushing his way into the lineups. We'll see. But I know we're hit the midpoint. So listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season, the trade deadline is behind us. Right around the corner is the playoffs and your favorite hardwood heroes are banging away for position in the postseason. So it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test before the season ends, and you can win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of a similar skill level. The best part, you get to draft a new team each and every day, and drafting is arguably the best part of fantasy. The only thing that's better is winning cash doing it. Just ask Dan from St. Louis or Jeremy from Austin. They both turned a $3 entry into $1,000. Huge cash prizes and bragging rights await only at DraftKings. And right now, you can use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total cash prizes tonight. So don't wait. Use code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup. Cash in tonight. That's CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. All right, John. So we've got to talk about the Lakers and we've got to talk about Hayward. Take your pick.
Hayward. All day. Hayward, man. That matters. That matters. That's hugely important. And you and I are right there at the top of the list of insane Hayward backers. So I think we need to stake that territory right here, right now.
Oh, well, we did because it's called an island and there's a whole lot of water around it. And we're the two people with the one palm tree and a boat with no oars and a leak in it. and we're going to be sticking around here for a while. So I'll tell you this. There's a lot of good commentary on Twitter about this. Some people citing, to me, Paul George and how long he dunked, I guess, in January, but it was still several months before he was even able to participate fully in practice and get back out on the floor. I do think that the injury is different. I think every injury is different unless it's the same injury, but everybody's rehab is going to vary greatly. Do I think that the timetable is tight? Yes, but I always did. I felt like if he would practice by the end of March, and we are getting a little too close to call for that, quite likely, John. I mean, only 60%, but that's a week old, so who knows what he's doing now. I know Brad Stevens said he's shut down, there's no way he's coming back, but I still gotta think, and even Steve Bulpett has been thinking, if you listen to Celtics Beat on Friday, that this is a guy who could return this season. Do I think he'll be 100% in terms of conditioning? No, I do not. Do I think he'll be worth 12 to 15 minutes off the bench, even if he's not in prime conditioning? Absolutely, I do. And he can hit those shots. So the question mark really for him is going to be a lot more about defense and lateral motion. But I think if he can practice by the end of this month, there's a good chance we see him get a little bit of run in the postseason. I still feel that way, even though Brad Stevens wants us to basically shut this conversation off.
Yes, exactly. I think this is Brad. This is Dad Brad stuff is what this is. This is Brad saying, let's ease up on our expectations of this. He has far and away been the most conservative of voices when it came to Hayward's recovery and his timetable. He has been the most ardent to say, no, he's not returning, this isn't happening. And then other people say other things, whether it's Hayward, whether it's Ainge, whether it's, whoever. And so that's why I'm like, look, I mean, I appreciate Brad's support of Hayward in this, and I think, he should minimize and tamp down expectations. We saw, stuff that went the other way. And I should also be clear, I don't know about you, but I feel like if he doesn't return, I'm not going to be disappointed. I'm not going to be disappointed because, look, I wish that would have happened, but look, that's it. Recurring from injury, there's nothing guaranteed. There is no, this is going to happen. But I do think he will come back, and I do think it will happen. Maybe the timetable is later. Maybe it's more closer to during the playoffs. But if we're looking at a long playoff run, again, it's a month from now is the end of March. Okay, so we still have 4 weeks here to get up to speed and where he's actually back to running on, him on 100%. Now is he running? When is he jumping and cutting and moving? That's another benchmark. And then, of course, actually playing the game. So there's a number of benchmarks here that have to happen. But as you said, the 60% number is an old number. We don't know where he is now. Okay. So assuming he's progressed in some way on that Alter G, from what was it before the All-Star break to now, which has been almost 3 weeks, you would think he would have worked his way up from 60% to somewhere closer to 90 to 100. If so, then he's got to be somewhere nearer to where he's running and jumping and on an elliptical and doing those things. So, look, we have 6 weeks now between now and the end of the regular season. That's a long time. That's a fair percentage of the time of his recovery.
And it can happen. He's been walking around unabated for a while, right?
Exactly.
And so I think this is about strengthening the muscles around the ankle. I don't think that it's simply he can't run and I'm sure there's pain associated, believe me. In any rehab, I'm sure there's a lot of pain and he can only take on so much at once. But to your point, he's already walking around. I think the Alter G is just about letting those muscles and those ligaments and everything kind of get strengthened back into place. If he is back, even if he's still at 60%, I'm still okay with that. I don't think that's detrimental. I just think they don't need a lot of impact to build the muscles. It's the motion difference between walking and running that's going to have the impact. It's not about carrying the weight at this point, I don't think, structurally. I think it's about just building up the strength so that it's less likely that he'll twist it. I'm not even sure that a break at this point or a re-break is that much of a concern. It could be. I'm not a doctor. Obviously in full game action, if he came and landed on it funny, it's weak, so it's more likely to pop out or break again, sure. But I think in just stationary running, I don't even think the amount of weight that they're putting on the leg has anything to do with it, because I think their only goal is to strengthen the muscles. And if that's the case, it's not really about how much weight he's putting on the ankle. It's the fact that it's unnecessary for them to put more weight on the ankle. That's my theory.
Wait, okay. Well, but I mean, you've got to think he's got to be able to run at 100%. 100% of his body weight, right? I mean, that's the point of the Ultra G, right? It's just
but I think
to
it's
slowly
on a plan.
increase that.
I think
right?
It's about strengthening the muscles. I think, yes, obviously they want to get to 100% on the running. I'm just saying, I just don't think that based on the time frame that they are worried about whether or not he can handle 100%. It's unnecessary to put the other 40% on there because they're just trying to build the muscle. Then when they have the muscle built back up and, he's got to be getting stretching because those muscles haven't been used in a long time, so they probably get contracted. I just think I think he probably could run at 100%. It's just unnecessary to do it.
Right. Well, and clearly he's doing other things. It's not like, okay, he's not doing anything else until that number on the Ultra G. Okay, when he gets to 100, then he can do everything else. Clearly that's not the case. Clearly he's doing a lot of other things, even on court work. Now is he jumping and moving and cutting? And no, I don't think that's happening right now. But
to me, that's about building muscle strength, not about the ankle's ability to maintain the impact, take the impact, or the weight. That's exactly my point.
Yeah, that seems fair. Absolutely. No, I get you there.
It's just they know it's going to take, let's say it's this way, right? I'll say it another way. They know it's going to take 8 weeks for those muscles to build up strength. So why put on extra weight when it's not even part of what needs to happen for those muscles to get to a baseline where he can take on 100%? See, I think that 60% thing is kind of misleading in terms of how people perceive his ability to hit the floor. That's why I'm still optimistic, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, we have. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead. I just was just to say, I think you're right. I think that he's closer than people are saying, and I think that 323. I think 323 might be practice return date, but I don't think it's going to be much after that. He's going to be a visible member of this team by the end of this month.
I'm with you, dude. We'll see. You and I are wearing the green colored glasses right now. We're on the island
Hayward
with green
Island.
colored shades. All right, so we have like 5 minutes left in the show. I want to just quickly say that the Lakers are totally spoiling my draft party because we may have to wait another year and collect that Sacramento pick. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 5 straight. And to just pour a little salt in that wound, Isaiah Thomas is, high volume, low percentage still a little bit on most nights, but he's definitely contributing and scoring 20 plus points off the bench. And then you've got to see, Mr. Lonzo Ball getting close to triple doubles, and I'm not happy about it.
They're 6.5 games back from the 8th seed in the Western Conference playoffs. And they have, let's see. Yeah, they've got about 20 games left to play. And they got 20 games left to play, and they're 6.5 games back. It's unlikely because obviously Denver right now is 35-28 as the 8th seed. The Clippers are a game back of that, Utah a game back behind that. But it's, you're right. It's unfortunate. The other thing I'd say is, remember, this is a lottery. So, the Cavs were 10th when they won the lottery there, the year that Anthony Bennett was chosen, something like that.
The thing is they can't.
It was the Wiggins. It was the Wiggins.
They have to just barely win it, but not quite win it. You know what I mean? They can't win it, and they can only really jump up a couple. You know what I mean? you wanted them in that like 3, 4, 5 slot at the end of the season. And yes, you're right. It could still convey, but the odds of it conveying are dropping dramatically right now.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, that's all right. But chin up here. Sacramento is 19-44. They're only a game back of the worst record. And there does not appear to be any big thing that will break positively for Sacramento in the next 18 months. So unless they get an absolute dynamite star,
it's just about the quality in this draft. It's really about the quality in this draft. And now maybe we could trade up in this draft and spin off a couple of pieces, but I just don't see Danny doing that. He'll just wait till next year. Let's do this.
Good players next year too, but not quite the depth or the players at the positions we want.
Right, exactly. This was a draft made for the constructs of the Boston Celtics. Unless, of course, they trade for somebody like Anthony Davis. We'll save that for another show. We'll save March Madness for next week. I want to quickly make our predictions for the games coming up. They get quite a bit of time off in between games. Two days off. Well, they have Monday off. They have Sunday off. So that's yesterday. Tonight they play the Bulls. Then they have 2 days off. Then they play the Timberwolves. Then they have 2 days off. And next Sunday night, they play a late game on Sunday, which actually has me encouraged. Game time start is 7:30 against the Pacers. And you would think that this would be a 3-0 week, John, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay it right down there. Except those T-Wolves are actually a pretty good team, but thankfully to an injury to Butler, I think they still get it done. 3-0. 3-0.
Yeah. I'd add Indiana is a pretty spunky group. Only a Terry Rozier
played us tough.
Shot at the buzzer.
That's right.
Yeah, pulled that one out. But I'm also going to go 3-0. Look, I think that Minnesota on the road, that'll be a tough out. Karl Anthony Towns had a really strong game back in Boston, back in the early part of the winter or late fall. So they're going to have their hands full with Towns, but I feel like the Celtics are going to have a good week here. We'll get 3-0 under their belt and kind of brush off what's going on. The main thing is we got to get Al Horford back going. Got to get that Al Horford back on the line, and hopefully some games here against Chicago and Minneapolis, or in Minneapolis against the T-Wolves will really help them out.
Yeah, well, as we wrap, the one thing I will also caution everybody is added time off for this team. Not always a good thing, at least not historically. So 2 days off in between games over the course of the week. Hopefully that means lots of practice time for Greg Monroe and Al Horford, and they get the ship righted. But I will say, when I say they get the ship righted, they've been playing really well as of late. Even that game against Houston was a very encouraging game for their performance. The bench's ability, which has been a constant complaint for you and I, John. So I will say there's lots to be encouraged about, but I think a little more practice time to kind of get everybody smoothed out a little bit would definitely help. But that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can support Celtic Stuff Live. Oh, that's right. You can, I should say the broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. I'm at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. This is the part where I remind you can help support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And for staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, and for my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.